In this webinar, we're going to discuss what makes a marketing campaign work. Now, for a lot of people, a simple question, and the answer probably most likely is, oh, great creative. But actually, as we're going to see as we go through this webinar, it is more than that, because behind every great campaign is structure, is clarity, and is purpose. And in this session, we're going to break down the key building blocks of an effective marketing campaign and go through the journey from goal setting at the outset to creative execution and then measurement, which is a key element at the end of the journey. So we're going to explore some ideas of how to move from strategy to delivery. We're going to focus in on some practical steps and examples that you can apply to your own campaigns and projects. So I'm hopeful that at the end of this, you will be able to identify and define some campaign objectives that will align with your business goals. Hopefully, you'll be able to segment and understand your target audiences, obviously a key thing for any successful campaign. You'll be able to develop clear, persuasive messaging, and through selecting appropriate media and channels, begin to get some really strong results. We'll look at planned timings and budgeting effectively, and also how to measure campaign performance using meaningful key performance indicators. And all of this stuff is based on best practice and industry theory, which has been proven over many, many years. So let's start by actually defining what is a marketing campaign. So a campaign is a coordinated series of activities designed to achieve specific marketing objectives. Okay, let's just pause there just for a moment and think, okay, is this what I'm actually doing when I think of a campaign, or am I throwing creative out into the world and just hoping we get some results? Think of that definition. It's a coordinated series of activities designed to achieve specific marketing objectives. Now, of course, it can run across multiple channels, but it must share one clear idea. So a great campaign, then, if we're working to that definition, will balance the strategy, the creativity, and the measurement. So the strategy, the why. Why do we need, or why are we doing this campaign? The creativity, the how we're going to do it appropriately. And the measurement, the proof of what happened, not necessarily huge success, because we often learn from when we don't get huge success, but actually being able to measure and understand what happened, whatever it is that happens. So there are 6 main building blocks, and we're going to go through each of these in more detail. But the 6 elements of a successful campaign are goals. What are you trying to achieve? Audience. Who are you talking to? Messaging. What are you saying? Media, where all of this is going to appear. Timing, when and how long will the campaign run, and measurement, how will you know it worked, or in some cases, for a larger campaign, what worked. So let's break this down then. So we're going to do, the first thing is to set the goals. So you need clear campaign goals, or SMART goals: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Campaign goals come from probably broader marketing or business objectives, because if you look higher in the strategy, higher up, a more kind of sort of umbrella view, if you like, or helicopter view, if your target for a campaign is to increase online leads by 15% in Q3, or maybe boost event registrations by 200 by the end of the month, or raise awareness of sustainability initiatives amongst 18 to 25s, all of those kinds of objectives will be there for a reason. They'll be there because you're trying to achieve something grander or at a higher level, more strategic. So think about your latest campaign. What was the higher level goal or objective that it was supporting? And was the goal that you then set SMART? Was it clear? Was it specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound? Because you'll need to have SMART goals if they are going to be relevant to achieving a high level goal. Then what we need to do is understand the audience. So we need to build an audience profile. And I would always encourage you to go beyond demographics and explore behavior, explore values, explore motivation. There are many tools available to help you to do this. Google Analytics to identify the age, location, and devices of people who are visiting your site, for example. YouGov profiles for attitudes and interests. A lot of interesting data in there. HubSpot persona templates, for example, to identify pain points and goals of your audience. So I would say maybe you go through a little mini exercise here. Write one persona statement. See if you can actually identify those three things in one statement. So give your person a name, your persona a name, and name is a role or age group who wants to, the goal, but struggles with the challenge. So what you're doing is you're actually saying, here's an individual who is a part of this kind of definition of who we're targeting. They want this kind of outcome, but they're struggling here because, of course, if you can understand that, then you're viewing your campaign and how it might fit into their narrative from their perspective. Rather than just, we've got a product to sell, let's do a campaign, you're actually thinking about the target audience and saying, okay, let's step into their shoes. Let's view what we're offering here through their lens. Then it becomes much more motivating and relevant. And you can, of course, break your audience into smaller and smaller, more and more actionable segments. And of course, what you're looking for here is the kind of characteristics of those segments and then matching a value proposition that talks their language. Because it might be that through a particular channel, say, let's say Instagram, for example, the value proposition could be time-saving convenience, whereas the same product or service in the same campaign through a channel like LinkedIn could be about growth support, for example. So different channels, slightly subtle and nuanced value propositions. And then, of course, falling out from that in a moment will be the messages. So what we're looking to do here is match audience with value proposition, with the channel that we're going to serve them through, and then eventually the messages will then be subtly focused on those particular segments. So really deep understanding of your target audience is clearly going to be absolutely vital. Because from that, then we can start to craft the message. Now, there is always a core message framework. So you could just do one size fits all campaign. So you're putting your campaign out and it is one message framework that you're using. But of course, if you have different segments, different personas, different audiences across different channels, you're probably going to want to craft the message subtly differently. But a great message answers three questions for the audience. What is it? The offer? Why does it matter? The benefit or outcome? And what should I do next? The action you want them to do. So you need to be including in your message the offer, the benefit, the action. What is it? Why does it matter or why is it relevant? And what can I do next? So an example would be the what. Our training app helps you learn in 10-minute sessions. The why, so you can upskill during your commute. And then the next, download the free trial today. So it really is that simple. These little building blocks, this little framework enables you to see how precisely you're targeting your campaigns through each of the channels. And you could put different messages into each of those little blocks there. But each of those is highly focused on the audience that it's talking to. What is it? Why does it matter to them? And what should they do next? Again, this is not rocket science, but so few people really think through these little process statements and actually start to understand it from the audience's perspective. Too often, and I fall into this trap too, I'm not just preaching what I don't do. What I do often is just think, oh, I've got this thing. I have little time to get this thing out into the marketplace. So I'm just going to push it out there. And I'm not spending enough time thinking about the nuances of the audience. So that is key. And of course, part of this crafting of the message is storytelling. So structure messages like stories with a beginning, a middle, and an end, identifying the customer problem, how your brand or product or service helps, and then the transformation or the outcome. And so what we're looking to do here is really make good use of tools to help us to see whether we're actually following through this flow. You know, these kinds of flows in storytelling, in blogging, in Hollywood with movies, they're not there by mistake. These are proven processes that work. So what you could do is an example technique is the PAS formula, the problem, agitate, and solve. So you identify, we understand your problem. You agitate it a little bit more by saying, okay, let's go deep because this is really quite painful for you, isn't it? But then you solve it in the end. And that's a really powerful storytelling campaign style because it says, we know what you're facing. We're going to tell you just how painful it is, but then we're going to remove the pain with our solution. That could be a very nice way of crafting messages. And of course, each one of those can play out through the different media or channels that you also choose. So we have our audience, we have our messages, we have our propositions, and then we're going to select the right channels, matching the channel to the audience behavior. And this one's important. What is it you want as a call to action? That action that the customer or the prospect is going to take next when they've seen the message, they get what you're offering up to them, what you're serving them, and then they want to do something about it. Well, for example, in paid search, matching a channel to the audience behavior is probably active intent. In other words, they're going to find you because they're actually actively looking for a solution to their problem. So the actual outcome then could be some product trials. Maybe you offer a little trial service, maybe a short-term free offer could be appropriate. If it's in social, this is about awareness and community. So you wouldn't necessarily take that same approach. You'd probably focus in your campaign on storytelling. With email, often the intent here is retention. You want to keep the customer on board, you want to keep them engaged, you want to keep on their radar. So probably loyalty campaigns would be appropriate in that media. And for events, for example, this is generally the mindset of consideration. We're often bringing people to events or conferences or exhibitions to take them further down the customer journey. So there, demonstrations could be a really useful tool or a useful approach to take if you're using events as part of your marketing campaign mix. Then you can also consider paid, owned, or earned media. And these three things are very, very different. This is the kind of the style through the channels that you're choosing, the style that you take. With paid, it's ads, it's sponsorships and promoted posts. Could be appropriate. That can get in front of an audience very, very quickly and very effectively if you have budget to spend. Owned is also very, very interesting because obviously that is the one that you can actually own. Nobody else can tell you you can't do it because it's things like website, email, an app, maybe print collateral, all those kinds of things come together in messaging channels that will actually serve you and you can control. The really interesting one, though, for me, is campaigns that focus on earned. This is where you're going to get PR coverage, where you might be able to encourage influencer posts, where you're hopefully going to be seeing some positive customer reviews. Those are earned media. And that's where basically, by doing a good job, you've earned the right to get those kinds of communications going out there. And of course, this is others marketing and advocating for you on your behalf. And that's where the real power comes from. There's a lot of research going back over the decades on this one, where often we see that up to 10 times more trust can be garnered by earned media because people trust. If somebody else is saying, hey, this is a great brand, this is something you need to check out, it's far more powerful, far more likely to get interaction than if the brand or the product themselves actually say it. So earned media can be a very powerful tool. But what I would encourage is for you to aim for a balanced mix. So you maximize your reach and you then can ensure the best kind of credibility if you go that way. So, for example, Nike's recent sustainability campaign, it owned storytelling, it earned influencer advocacy, and it had paid placements in certain channels that it chose. So that's a lovely kind of balance. And maybe paid, owned, and earned could be the next kind of step forward in maybe improving the kinds of campaigns you're running, where you actually can, if you do have some budget for the paid, you can actually start to think at this multi-level approach, which could be very, very, if you plan it right, very, very effective. So we've got an audience, we've chosen some channels, we know who we're kind of targeting, we've set our goals already, we're starting now to tell some stories or maybe place some ads. We now need to think about appropriate campaign timing, budget, and delivery. So in this part, we're going to begin with the campaign timing. And the ideal scenario is that you're building the timing around customer and market cycles. It is really important to think outside of your organization here because you need to kind of be timing and pacing your campaigns based on what's going on in the big wide world. And if there is some kind of seasonality, or if the customer is actually already on a customer journey, and what you're trying to do is take them to another step in the journey or another stage of the journey, then it's very important to consider the pacing of your campaign. This is where it goes beyond just being about you. Yes, of course, you want the leads. Yes, of course, you want the sales ASAP, but it's not about that. It's about thinking what is the most appropriate pacing, what is the most appropriate kind of speed of delivery of this campaign for the audience through the channels that we're looking through, and actually then in terms of seasonality as well. And of course, then when it comes to budget allocation, because the likelihood is you might not necessarily have actual cash budget to spend, but you're still going to be spending. You're going to be spending the resources of your organization. Even if you don't spend cash and money, it's still an investment of time and energy. So your budget allocation generally is going to be in this kind of a balance, the 70-20-10 rule. So 70% of where you're focusing your attention in a campaign that will work will be on proven channels, stuff that you know and you can trust. So you're going to evolve it, yes, and improve it. Of course you are, but it's in proven ways that you've done before that you know you can kind of rely on. But if you continue to just do that, you will never actually make progress. And in fact, actually standing still, the old adage, standing still is actually going in reverse. So you do need to spend maybe 20% on new ideas. So that's time, energy, and probably budget, trying and testing out new stuff. And actually, the new ideas that you want to do, maybe you've got the data that shows, yeah, okay, this is pretty likely to work as well, but we need to move our game on. And we would also say that maybe 10% is in stuff that's kind of maybe right out there. So maybe you try a different style of storytelling, or maybe you've never used influencers as part of your strategy, and now you're going to show 10% attention and focus on maybe an influencer plan within your campaign. And so by looking at this kind of balance, you're always trying to move the game forward rather than just repeat, repeat, repeat. This is how we do a campaign. These are the channels we always use. This is kind of where our audience is. And it goes very flat very quickly. 70% of your energy and attention in that direction is great. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you need to be doing a revolution of this every time you do it. Evolution is key. So 70% proven, 20% some new ideas, and then 10% the experimental innovation is a great balance to do it. And then you want to know what's actually happening. So you're rolling your project out with that seasonality through the channels to target the audiences with your storytelling, your paid, owned, or earned. And so you're up and live. So what you want to be doing is not necessarily just measuring it at the end of the campaign that you've set, that timeline that you've already established, but actually doing it as you go. And this is where we introduce this concept, and I mentioned it earlier, of key performance indicators. Because these key performance indicators allow you, because the name says they are key, so they're important, they're performance, so it's how you're doing, and they're indicators. So they give you a little nudge, they wave a little flag as you're going through the campaign to allow you to adjust the direction, maybe just turn the rudder just slightly to maybe move in a slightly different direction as you're going. Those are key things that you want to be focused on. And they are taking you towards the achievement of your SMART objectives that you set. So your KPIs, for example, if you were focusing on creating awareness, let's just say it's a project or a campaign that's focused on awareness. Well, a KPI could be reach and impressions of your campaign. That's not the actual end objective, because your objective is something bigger, more strategic, but the KPI is showing how you're moving to getting towards that objective solved. If it was the objective was something around engagement, then things like click-throughs and comments obviously would be quite interesting to be then having as your indicators. Your KPIs then are showing how you're progressing towards your goal. If it was a conversion objective, and of course, this is customer journey we're working through here. So, conversion objective here, well, then it would be leads, sales, sign-ups, those hard numbers that you want as KPIs to see if ultimately at the end of the journey, you've actually achieved your objective. And if it's the retention stage of the journey, that's your objective, then repeat purchases or net promoter score to see customer satisfaction. Those could be your KPIs. But remember, these are not the goals. These are not your objectives. They're indicators of how you're progressing. The goal, the smart objective, the smart goal is at a higher level. And that's the end result that you're looking for. So this is where a lot of people get this bit wrong. They say, oh, look, these are my objectives. They're not. They are just your indicators on the journey towards achieving your objective. That's a big, big key thing. And that's a differentiator here when you start to tell the story to the organization of how you are doing and how your project or campaign turned out. So then we get to the measurement and evaluation bit. This is about interpreting the results. So you can ask what worked best. You can ask what underperformed and why. You can ask what will we change next time. And of course, we've now got the wonders of AI to enable us to go deeper into interpreting the results because with multivariate analysis, our AIs can actually go deeper than anything we could see as human beings. So you can get in there with your AI and start to really interrogate the data. What worked best and why? What underperformed and why? And what will we change next time and do better? So this is enabling us to kind of continually improve. I love this whole idea. And all these kind of tools are available to us to be able to really uncover those little forensic details that are going to enable us to just get better and better and better. AI is going to help us spot hidden patterns much faster, but the decisions that are going to come from those patterns are still us. We still need to make the ultimate decision as to will we do this campaign again? Or if we're going to do this campaign again, what would we do differently next time? That's still our responsibility. But work with your AI to identify the top three things that would make a difference next time if we change them. And obviously, with AI, you can then get the details about, well, what would we do differently next time? Not just we need to, but actually, what would we do? That's where it gets super, super interesting. And I always get really excited by that bit because it is a continuous learning process. So, your campaign blueprint, if we were to call it that, is now starting to take shape, isn't it? So, your goal, what do we want to achieve? The audience, who are we reaching? The message, what are we saying? The media, where is this going to appear? The timing, when will it run? And the measurement, how will we know it worked? And each stage feeds the next, and of course, loops back for continuous improvement because the continuous improvement could happen at any of these six stages. And this is our blueprint. If we follow this process, it is a framework that works with us and for us. If we follow this framework each and every time, we're going to start to see some trends. We'll uncover a pattern, if you like, of continuous improvement. And maybe it's always in the message, or maybe more often than not, it's the media where it's going to run, or maybe we're just setting our goals too high, or maybe we're not specific with our audience. Wherever and however you start to see patterns, that's where the magic happens. So we can start off really by doing best practice and maybe a quick campaign diagnostic for an existing campaign you have running or maybe one you're looking to set up. Here are some questions to ask you. Do I have one clear goal? Can I describe my audience in one sentence? Is my message or messages, are they short, clear, and benefit led? Have I chosen the best three channels for that audience? And have I defined success metrics before launch? And if, of course, the answer is no to any of these questions, that's where to focus next. That's where your attention needs to go. Again, that's where it gets really interesting because you're just tightening things up. You're just fine tuning the dial here on all of these categories because you're probably doing a lot of this stuff well already. But this is where the magic identifies what you could do even better. And we're looking to try and get this to kind of world class if we can. Now, of course, if you're running multiple campaigns or you have multiple audiences, or you're just kind of really finding this is adding another layer to an already hectic day, then there are many workflow tools for campaign management. You've got tools for planning, for design, collaboration, and reporting. And I would always recommend to test free versions to learn workflow discipline, figure out how this works at the next level of detail down, because I'm still talking quite high level here, but there are tools here that enable you to do this stuff, learn at every single step, and just get better and better and better. And if you find there are bottlenecks or gaps where you think, that's one thing we don't do too well, again, that is where to start. Remember, we're looking at incremental gains, little bite-sized chunks of activity that will maybe just incrementally improve everything that you do. And of course, as part of this, what we're doing is to try and manage risk and can put in some kind of contingency into this, because we're not going to get this right every time, all the time. And I mean, common issues will happen, things like delays or overspend or getting approvals for your content. We need to be building contingency into our timelines. Often the campaign isn't because we didn't know what we were doing, or, we set the targets too high. It can often be a process thing. And maybe because we're working with others, maybe not in isolation, or we've got an agency that we're working with, it is about making sure there's enough of a contingency in there so we don't overstretch, we don't overpromise, and then we don't come in short. And tracking dependencies and creating some sign-off points, always having backup content plan if one channel fails, always having that plan B available is just a great way of confidently saying, I've got this. Whatever happens, I can go to a plan B, or I can just bring this little contingency sort of answer into play. That is the real way of doing it. And of course, as part of that, and included within this broader kind of checklist that we're working to here, learning from each campaign involves making the time, putting the time into your timeline for a short debrief meeting after each campaign. You need to be documenting. You can't retain this all in your mind. So you need to document what worked, what didn't, what were the lessons for next time, and maybe even store this in a shared kind of campaign playbook, because this would be the way to build learning and consistency with everybody who's involved in campaigns within your business. That's really important. A lot of the time, we find that there's maybe one or two people, maybe it's your agency, maybe it's you, maybe it's a colleague, who are just kind of really good and really sharp at this stuff, but everybody else is kind of just sort of, in their wake, and they're trying to kind of get better and better, but there's no kind of shared learning or consistency, because well, one person's got the process, somebody else does the creative, and we don't kind of join up properly. This is an important part. Learning from each campaign collaboratively enables this shared campaign playbook to be developed. And it will enable you to use the campaign maturity model. It will go from level one, which is often quite reactive. I mean, probably can have experienced that. Maybe that's what you live in right now, which is very kind of short term and very kind of one-off reactive styles of campaigns. Maybe moving us to level two, which is more proactive, more data driven. And then ideally, what we're all trying to get to is this level three campaign maturity where everything is optimized. We're not perfect. We've still got things to improve, but it is predictive. It's AI enhanced. We're continuously learning. We've got the campaign playbook, and we are consistently applying it. So we might not be perfect, but we know where we are. We know we're learning. We know we're developing, and everything is just getting better and better at every step. So the key takeaways really when you're kind of trying to figure out what makes a marketing campaign work is that every campaign starts with a clear purpose and measurable goals. If you know your audience and you can tailor every channel to them, and it is on their terms, it is where they already are, probably. You don't want to drag them kicking and screaming into your world. You want to go where they are. That's important. And if you can craft messages that connect emotionally as well as practically, and then use data before for planning, during as you're using your KPIs, and then after as you're analyzing, this will guide your decision making, the way you prioritize. What am I going to do next within or after the campaign? And remember, great campaigns are built, they're not improvised. So this is about setting up a framework, a structure, a template, a process, a system, whatever word you want to use, however you want to describe this. This is about predictable, consistent, and accurate, and continuous learning. Those are the kind of the throwaway phrases, but they are really important flavors for how you're going to do this going forward. And a final reflection really is that, as I'm sure you're seeing and feeling now, campaigns don't succeed by luck. They succeed by a structure, by a focus, and by continual iteration. And I love this phrase from CIM Campaign Planning 2024. If you can't explain why your campaign exists, it probably won't work. So there's a good starting point. Everything we do in campaign planning and campaign delivery needs to play back against a higher level objective. Otherwise, the ultimate question is why? And if we can answer that why, and it's got a strategic answer because we're making a difference for the customer and for our business, then that is why and what makes a campaign work.